Te amo. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Karina.
How are you?
Doing well, yourself?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, the usual.
Yeah, I hear you.
Any plans for the weekend?
I have a family party at my house, so I have to clean up and get ready for that. And
Oh, fabulous.
yeah, it's supposed to be some work outside on Sunday, but it's gonna rain, so
Ooh.
yeah, we'll see. How about you?
My brother has a military ball tomorrow, so I'm traveling.
Oh, North Carolina?
West Virginia.
Nice.
Yeah. Except it's mostly like just PA. Like, does it
Okay.
count as West Virginia? It's like just barely passing the border.
Yeah, okay. That's not bad. It's not a bad drive.
No.
That'll be fun.
Yeah. Hi, Sterling. Hi, Monica.
Hello.
Glad to see you all here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're just going to wait for people to trickle in until 6:05, and then we'll get started.
Sounds good.
Hi, Dr. Kozlowski. We're just going to wait until 6:05 to get started.
Sounds good. Thanks, Karina.
For those of us that are just joining now, we're going to wait 5 minutes to let everyone trickle in. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. So hello everyone, my name is Karina and I'm going to be your host today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're a Jefferson student, you can post questions you have in the chat and I'll keep my eye on that throughout the session. So I wanted to get started by asking our speakers to introduce themselves, give us their job title and a short explanation of what they do. Sterling, you're the first on my screen. Do you want to get us started?
Yeah, sure. I'm Sterling. I recently graduated from college, relatively recently in 2019, and then did my master's in clinical and therapeutic neuroscience, which I graduated from at the end of last year. Since graduation, I've come back to Philly and started working at the Lifespan Brain Institute, which is a joint collaboration between the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and the Hospital of University of Pennsylvania, where I do psychiatric research. Specifically, most of my research looks at environmental adversity and traumas, and then resilience and susceptibility factors to those traumas, specifically in the context of PTSD and suicide. And yeah, that's what I do.
Monica, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Crosby. I received my undergraduate degree from University of Delaware, studying environmental studies and geology. I graduated from that in 2019. I then went on to receive my master's in GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, and I graduated from that in August of 2020. I'm now an environmental scientist for the EPA. I work in the water division in the NPDES, which stands for the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, in the Enforcement and Compliance Assurance Division. So my role involves a wide range of things. I perform the inspections of wastewater and industrial facilities to ensure that they are abiding by their permits and not exceeding their allowed discharge of pollutants into water bodies. I take enforcement against facilities that aren't following their permits. This enforcement can range from informal, such as just issuing them a warning letter, or it can be formal, such as, issuing a case against them with a lawyer, a penalty, and if serious enough, the case will go to court. Because of my background in GIS and coding, I also do a lot of data work for the agency. This includes creating a database for the agency, reworking the way the agency does the targeting and selection of facilities to inspect, analyzing water quality data, and more of the like. So that's a little bit about me and what I do.
You can go ahead, Joe.
Thanks. Joe Plummer. I graduated from LaSalle, my undergrad from LaSalle University in Philadelphia. I then went down the street to Thomas Jefferson University to pursue my master's in microbiology and immunology. It was there when I left in 2018, where I got a job at Janssen Biopharmaceuticals, powered by J&J, where I now work as a senior associate scientist on a CAR-T project. A lot of my day-to-day is wet bench work, directly correlative of the work I did in my graduate research. So my role is really just pure science, and then I have some people under me that I manage as well. So we currently work on CAR-T therapies, if you're not familiar, but it's a cancer therapy, and we have multiple targets that we look at. We start from the ground and go all the way up. It's really an R&D position. So we take a look at small molecules, we funnel them down into lead molecules, and then we work to translate them into T cells, where we then look at allogeneic platforms, autologous platforms, all different types of cells, and how we can really prevent cancer. We have a number of targets at any time, but currently we have 3 main ones that really take up the bulk of our work.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and dive into our questions. So this will be pretty informal. Whichever of our speakers wants to dive in and answer first, go ahead. Could you speak on your work-life balance? What are the typical hours? Do you have a fixed or flexible schedule?
I can hop in here. In terms of work-life balance, Johnson & Johnson claims that they're the healthiest, most work-life balance company in the world. At least in 2021, they tried that. So they do offer a lot of services that, your day-to-day you work, but they have lots of, take 15-minute breaks. They have standing desks. They have work-family time, which you can take off anytime if something happens that doesn't use vacation. Obviously, a lot of that has changed through the COVID era. But typically it was really, you were there 8 hours a day, but you didn't have to work the whole time. You kind of just got your notes done, you're in the lab. But now currently we're on an ad hoc basis, where if I have an experiment, I go in, I run it, and then I come home for the rest of the day and analyze my data and really just finish the rest of my 8-hour shift at home.
I can hop in next. I don't know if I can top, having family and children time. That's pretty cool. But at the EPA, so we are able to change our schedule 6 times a year for whatever reason. So you can kind of choose how you want to work as long as you work, the certain 40-hour work week. So right now, I currently work on a compressed 9-4-5 schedule, meaning that one week I work 4 days, 9 hours. So I work Monday through Thursday, 9 hours. I'm off that Friday. And then the next week I work Monday through Thursday, 9 hours, and I work that Friday, 8 hours. So this upcoming Friday, tomorrow, I'll work 8 hours, whereas next Friday I'll be off. You can do a maxi flex schedule. So if you have a big vacation coming up and you don't want to use all your vacation time, you can work an extra hour every day for like a couple weeks or something. So that way, you can maxi flex the additional hours and take off free time. And then, you can do a typical 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. A lot of people do compressed 4-10s. So there is flexibility in that area, and you are allowed to change it 6 times a year, which is nice. The work-life balance is really nice. We try and, really stress work when you work and live when you live. Obviously, everyone tries to book their designated lunchtime. Things can kind of get a little tricky because the agency can get really busy. So sometimes things run into, the lunch hours or whatever, but usually everyone is really considerate. And we're also, you have a certain number of hours for vacation that you get every 2 weeks, and same with sick time. And the managers are really understanding in that you don't really need to give them too much of a heads up. If it's your time is what they look at it as. And so you can use it however you want. You don't really need to give an explanation. So I do think that the work-life balance is really nice. And they really try to incorporate a lot of social activities too. So, spending lunch, they'll have like yoga sessions during lunch on like Tuesdays and Thursdays if you want, or like painting with a twist after work, or happy hours, or going for a hike or Quizzo and things like that. So they try and make it fun.
Yeah, I think especially right now for me, the work-life balance is really easy to manage. I think partly that's a result of COVID and work from home. Even though I work in clinical research, most of my work comes from home right now. The only time I go in is if I have some sort of IT issue, or if we need to put a patient through a scanner and someone needs an extra. For the studies I work on right now, I'm not putting anyone directly through the scanners. So in terms of setting that work-life balance, I'm technically a salaried employee. So I just have to sign off that I worked 40 hours a week, and I don't necessarily have to log exactly when those hours happened. For me, that makes it really easy to balance. It means that I can wake up and start work at 10 some days. It means that I can often take breaks to go to the gym or go on a run or just go out to get lunch with a friend or something during the middle of the day. With research in general, and my job in particular right now, things tend to be pretty flexible. In my experience, the only time where you really need to be around are for collaborations and when you need to do something in office. So for a wet lab, where you're doing more like molecular cellular research, that tends to be everything. But for clinical research, especially right now when it's mostly data driven, and even when it's not, a lot of our patient interaction is telehealth, you can really get that done when you want to get it done. So for me, I tend to have most of my meetings in the mornings, and then by the afternoon, I'm free to decide how to use my time. So if I want to spend my day doing something else and then work kind of in the evening, or just get my work done early, it's really flexible and up to me. As long as I'm on call and in front of my phone or my computer during work hours, which are 9 to 5, I should be fine.
And going off of the time work balance, um, how has COVID impacted how you do your job? Has there been any change? And is your company kind of shifting towards a new hybrid model, as we're seeing a lot of companies start to do. They're thinking about keeping some of the work from home aspect.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I didn't mention, we were a 40-hour work week where we were there 8 hours a day. During the shutdown, we were 100% virtual, except for a small skeleton crew of people that went in just to keep the place afloat. There hasn't been anything official, but as about September or so, as I mentioned, we were more ad hoc. So if you need to go in and do an experiment, you're in, where you wear a mask and you just schedule a time on the computer to book a hood or book a Fortessa or something that you need to do your experiment. You go in, you run it, you send your data to your computer, and then you leave and you go home and spend the rest of your day to analyzing that data. So it's really changed what it used to be, but a lot of us like it for the better, because if you're there and you have a 1 hour experiment, what do you do for 7 more hours? But now you can actually go home, get your stuff done, and work from the comfort of your own home. So there is some chatter that it will stay that way, because I believe productivity has actually increased over this, because people go in and they know when you're done your work, you can go home. So you're going to go in, you're going to get it done. You're not going to talk. You're not going to waste time around the water cooler. And then you get home and it's, your comfort of your own house to analyze your data. And it's been going really well. So there is some push to keep it that way. I really like that. And I think having a day or two work from home really is a good thing. So hopefully we'll stay that way at J&J.
Yeah, I second that. The productivity has definitely increased a lot, which I don't think that they were expecting. But you're at home and you're working, so like what else are you gonna do? So the productivity definitely has increased. And I actually came on during COVID, so I started with the agency back in May. So I don't really know much about what work was in the office. But before COVID had happened, you were only allowed to telework once a week. Now that they have seen how productive everyone is being, they have increased it so that you're going to be able to telework 2 days a week. And so, that could change. A lot of people like being in the office because, you can bounce questions off of each other. It's a lot easier to, turn to the person next to you and ask a question, or, run an idea off of them, rather than right now you have to set up like an entire meeting, or, everyone's schedules are so different right now and everything. So it gets a little tricky that way. But other than that, it's been really nice. And I think that, seeing how productive everyone has been is definitely going to change things for the future.
Yeah, in my line of work, COVID's kind of turned everything on its head, especially because we are a clinical research lab and the majority of our time beforehand was spent in hospital with patients. Luckily for more psychological, psychiatric research, a lot of the things that we did in person can be done via telehealth. So for a lot of the patient assessments that we were doing in person before, we now do them over Zoom. It does change the things we can do with patients. For example, when we give assessments, we no longer ask about things that are more sensitive or things that may be triggering. So we no longer take information about suicidality because it's not something we want to do over Zoom. We want to be actually with the person when we ask them those sorts of questions. So it's been a little bit tricky having to adjust all of our research protocols and figure out for studies that require things like that, when they can come in, when we can see them. And our capacity to see patients in person right now is relatively low. So really we only see a few patients a week, if that, just so we can put them through the scanner, and then hopefully when they're in, if we need to do any more sensitive probing about psychopathological things, we can do it then. It also has shifted our work a little bit away from direct patient interaction and towards more data science type things. So we're now utilizing a lot of really, really big data sets that have already collected data and that we can go back and retroactively analyze. There are a few different studies. For example, the Adolescent Brain and Cognitive Development Study has been going for a couple of years. And they interviewed like 12,000 kids from all over the country. And the point of the study is just to collect all this data so that researchers like us can go and look at it and look for different associations or longitudinal correlations, because they take the data every year. The plan is to do it for over 10 years. So we've seen a shift to do what we can, really. So a lot of that has turned to online patient interaction and then more data science driven projects as opposed to smaller scale in-house, in-hospital patient studies.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I'm a bench scientist, so this is all new to me. Could you each talk about how you found your current jobs, especially for those of you who found your job during COVID? What was that like?
Yeah, so unlike Monica, I got my job before COVID, so I had a little bit of knowledge about how it worked before and after. But in terms of how I found my job, I graduated in 2018. I from Thomas Jefferson, spent a few months afterwards just kind of starting the application process post my graduation. For me, it was a very basic process. I just went online. I took my interest, I took my abilities and the things that I liked, and I searched a lot of the large pharmaceutical companies for this position. I knew I didn't want to stay in research. I wanted to kind of jump ship and go into the industry from the academia. And so really I just searched the big names and some small names and startups and for things that correlated with what I did. And it was amazing that a lot of the jobs that you saw that were like, this is perfect, there's 10 bullet points and I have 11 of them that match perfectly. Those are the ones that some of them I didn't hear back from. You'd be kind of surprised about what you do hear back from. I was a B-cell virologist and now I'm a cancer T-cell scientist. So it kind of just flipped on its head. But yeah, so for me, it was just sending out applications. I didn't go through anyone I knew or any references. And the interview started, and lucky or not lucky for me, it was all in person. So I got to travel around to a number of different companies and just kind of landed at one that fit me well. It was close, benefits were good, and yeah, nothing to it. Just kind of applied to a bunch of positions, and whoever called back, I determined if I wanted to go interview, and I went for
it. You want? Okay, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
For me, and I think this might be very specific to research jobs. I also joined my lab during COVID. I started at the end of 2020. I actually had been in England for my master's and had to come home because of COVID. So I was living at home, finishing my master's remotely, and knew I just wanted to get out of the house as soon as possible. So while I was finishing my master's, I decided to start applying to jobs, which for me was less about applying and more about making connections. So in terms of applications, I only put out one or two, but what I would do is think of places I wanted to be, think of institutions that I respected or where I knew there was research happening that I was interested in, and just sent out a lot of relatively cold emails to different scientists or PIs or doctors I had found, basically saying, hi, like this is who I am. I'm finishing up my master's and this is what I studied, and I see your work doing this, and this is why it's interesting to me. And if you have some time to chat, could we chat about what you do and me potentially joining your team in the future? And sent a ton of those emails out just to people kind of all over the place. And that is kind of what I had done before looking for research work. I think during COVID, it was a lot less fruitful, especially looking in the clinical sphere, just because a lot of those labs that normally were operating and would be taking new employees had basically shut down. And I did get a lot of emails saying things like, oh, well, we would love to chat, but we're not actually performing research right now because our clinic is shut to anything that's not essential. But it did get me a lot of contacts, and it actually did get me the job that I have now. So in terms of research, I would say it's a lot about just reaching out to people that you think you want to work with and having a conversation and seeing where that goes.
Okay, so yeah, I actually found my job prior to COVID. I found my job, I think I got the call in December of 2019. And I really utilized a lot of the job search platforms such as LinkedIn, mostly LinkedIn. There are the other ones, that Glassdoor, things like that I did use. And then after that, I kind of just tailored to where I wanted to work. I had a couple options of places I wanted to work and, what I was really looking for. I knew that I kind of wanted a really big option for me was to go into the federal government. So I would constantly check USA Jobs, because a lot of things will be posted there that aren't posted on LinkedIn or Glassdoor or sites like that. And it just so happened that, I came on as a Pathways intern. And so there is a window that's like 2 weeks long where the applications for Pathways are open, and I managed to find it in that 2 weeks. So it was kind of, just luck almost, but also, just really putting a lot of effort into my resume and my cover letter for that one, to try and make yourself stand out amongst the other applicants. So then I got my offer in February and was supposed to start in March, but obviously that's when everything happened. So it took a couple months and it didn't start until May. But yeah, I would just say just to check back on sites. I think cold emails are a really good way to, get your name out there, really make yourself stand out. Attend talks, attend networking events such as this one, things like that. So yeah, if you're here, you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Yeah, I think our speakers are really honing in on the importance of networking. And that's kind of how we all found each other, right? So for our Jefferson students, make sure you check out your Canvas page and go to the career development resources. And there's a whole section on networking there. So I'm shifting to our chat questions. What is your favorite part about your job? And on the contrary to that, what's the least favorite part about your job?
Is a favorite part about a job is a tough question, but I guess having the opportunity to bounce around and interview at a whole lot of companies, you get to see how every company works and the dynamic, at least in your time there during these interview processes. I was lucky enough to find a job that really interests me. So, we're working on not cancer therapies, but cancer cures. So one of the most exciting things that I do is get to see the results and actually have a chance to meet some of the patients that have been cured of cancer from some of the work we've done. So for my favorite part is probably the rewarding nature of it, and the very hands-on. Every day I see, the cells that we create destroy cancer, and knowing that that's steps away from the clinic that could help somebody. The least favorite part of my job is probably dealing with some of the, the industry red tape and the pitfalls and some of the expectations. Again, a large company like Johnson & Johnson, you really have to push yourself to learn everything you can, even though it's impossible, and to really find out how the system works. And really, you're just kind of a pawn. But I say pawn, but I don't feel that way. We actually have a really good dynamic. And so it's a hard question about what I like least, but I guess for me, it was jumping from academia to industry and really figuring out the dynamic when you really don't know. So you're starting from the bottom up. And some days that's a little tough, but you get used to it.
Okay, I'll hop in here now. There are a couple things that are my favorite part about the job, which I think that speaks a lot in and of itself. kind of to echo what Joe had said, in that there's a lot of flexibility and mobility. So when you're in the agency, there's a lot of opportunities for details. So, you could go for 120 days, 90 days, or even like a permanent position, just switch over to a different program within the agency, whether that be AIR or Superfund or something like that, which is really, really neat. There's also a lot of, other opportunities, such as, I'm a part of a natural disaster resource support group. So, if there's a natural disaster, I'm a part of a group that could get deployed and go help repair the area and the local people around that area. Right now, there was also a work group for people to volunteer to go, help children at the border, things like that are being displaced. And so, there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of mobility. Another part that I really like is the travel experience. So in order to conduct an inspection, I can go anywhere within Region 3, which is PA, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, West Virginia, and DC. So say, for instance, on Sunday, I'm leaving to go to Virginia and I'm staying there until Tuesday. If you were in Region 8, which is like Colorado, you could go anywhere from like Utah, Montana, around that area. So it is really cool, and you do see a lot. So yeah, I think that, and also just the people, everyone is really, really nice. And I think, the people that you work with says a lot. It makes it a really enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I think for me, my favorite part is the people that I work with, and I mean that in two ways. One, it's really cool to have the coworkers I do, especially we're very interconnected within our institute. So the new people like me, who's relatively new, have really easy access to speak to and to be in meetings with and to learn from the people who have run the institute for like 40 years. Um, for me, as someone who's kind of figuring out their future from here, it's really, really cool to have those sorts of exposure opportunities and just to be able to, quiz this like extremely accomplished scientists about like what they like about their job and, what excites them about the field. Um, so you get to meet a lot of people both within institution, and also we do a lot of collaboration outside of our institution with a bunch of other university labs across the country, even if we're not meeting in person right now. Um, and then also, and I think this can apply to any job, I found that the people that I work with, especially during COVID, have been like extremely accepting. And we place a lot of focus at my job on community. So we have coffee hours a few times a week. We have a lot of little interest groups. For example, I'm in one about gardening. So we just kind of talk about gardening, and it's a good way to get to know people at your job. Especially for me, I'm lucky in a sense that I did my undergraduate degree in Philly. So being back here now, I know people and I'm not super lonely. But if I had been in a new city, having a job like this where they really stress welcoming new people and the community aspect of the work is really meaningful to me. And it's something I don't like as much, and this goes for any type of research, is that at points it can get extremely, extremely tedious. And there are parts of the job where you have to get away from what you actually want to do. So for example, right now we're working on submitting a manuscript for publication, which now that the manuscript is basically written, our last 2 or 3 weeks has been making tables, formatting, reading through the guide for authors from the journal, like excruciatingly in detail, prepping all of these things that it's really just formatting and making a figure and reading through the same manuscript over and over and over again. And similarly, when you submit something and then you get it back for edits, it becomes my full-time job for like a week, just to focus on doing all the things that the journal asked me to do to edit the paper, which is, it's an adjunct to the science and it's kind of an annoying one. But at the end of the day, that's what makes the job go around. But But yeah, it can definitely get annoying, especially now coming up onto my third week of manuscript preparation.
Feel you there. So our next question comes from Lilith. How does it feel working as a master's level professional and your autonomy relating to that?
Yeah, so good question. That was one of my main questions during my interview process is, as a master's student, where do I fall? And where's my floor and where's my ceiling? That was really important to me. I interviewed at a number of companies. Some companies said, you really need your PhD to move up. Everyone had their different opinions. And one of the selling points for me at my company now was that there was many people, and many of which I spoke to during my interview, that had their masters or even some in their bachelors that had a 10, 20 years experience at the company now are in PhD levels. So it really, for me, in the pharmaceutical industry, it depends on where you're at. But for me, I feel really comfortable working there right now as a master's student. And then another thing that I learned through many of my interviews is that a lot of places offer PhD programs within the organization. So they will fund all your research. You'll still work your 40-hour work week, and you'll just devote some of that time to working in your external PhD program as more of a part-time. There's probably 2 people that I work with now that are doing that, and they're working their full-time jobs and they're getting their schooling done without missing a beat. So there's definitely some really nice opportunities and lucrative opportunities to get your PhD while in an industry position. But to answer the question, where I'm at now, I don't feel like there's a ceiling for me with a master's degree. And it's really prepared me for what I'm doing now. And it's nice to know that you can move without having to do a lot more schooling. But really just depends on where you're at and what you're doing.
Yeah, I think being a master's or having my master's, besides, the little bit of a pay boost, I think it's nice because I feel heard more, especially as a newer employee. When it comes to something, especially in what I studied, the people I work with will most likely take my word for it, or will hear me out, or will kind of just let me do my thing. So say, for instance, with data or GIS stuff, the agency in my division specifically, if I have an idea, they'll kind of let me take it and run with it. They'll, let me work behind the scenes kind of by myself with like little to no check-in, just kind of, basically seeing, if I'm doing okay, do I need help? And usually, I'll say, no, it's fine. Like I'm good, whatever. So I think, I feel very independent in the work that I do. I'm allowed a lot of freedom. And also, I don't know if it's just my supervisor, but I want to say probably not, because, sometimes you get a degree and you don't end up where your degree was. So, I'm in the water division and my master's degree was in geographic information systems, which kind of is very flexible and can go, anywhere. But my supervisor, my division really want me to utilize that. And they want me to, really expand on that. So, for instance, coming up with the idea of making a database or, restructuring the way that the team does targeting. They put a lot of trust in me because I have a master's, and they really hear me out, it's nice, especially as a young professional.
I think in psychiatry and medicine in general, there by necessity is some sort of hierarchy. So there's definitely a ceiling to me in terms of the things I could do, at least on the patient side. With my master's, I'm never going to be able to treat or prescribe anything to patients. That being said, especially from my past research experiences, I'm really surprised by the amount of autonomy and the amount of responsibility I get to take on at work. On the other side of things, on the more research-oriented side of things, I feel like there's really not any sort of ceiling. And my boss has said multiple times you're doing things that someone with a PhD would do. It's really just about showing that you can handle the responsibility and showing that you're able to absorb the information. And I'd say that it's relatively easy to move up along the research ladder, and take on responsibilities. And as a student with a master's or a graduate with a master's, you can be really, really productive in the research scene. I just joined my lab in November, and I'm now working on my third and fourth first author papers, which is crazy. It's something that I never expected. And it's definitely partly because of my master's and the experience in research that I gained from my master's. So yeah, I think it depends on which route you want to go in the clinical scene. If you want to go more toward patient care, there's definitely a ceiling, but I think it's given me a lot of great kind of insight and experience working with patients. But on the research side, I feel like I could keep moving up, and I'm very happy with the amount of autonomy that I've been given.
Thank you. Maisha would like to know, how soon in advance would you suggest applying for jobs before graduating?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I guess the easy answer would be it's never too early, because you can't assume that you're going to send an application out for that perfect job. You're just going to hear back in a week, and then you're going to have an interview, then you're going to have a job. It really is, every process is different. It takes months to find jobs, and it just depends on the climate. Not too sure how it is now at a lot of companies, but my gut would say it's best to start applying when you're ready. When your resume or your CV is tight and ready to go, you start networking, you start hearing names. It's never too early to send things out. Personally, I waited until my paper was published, and then I graduated, because it just was a good stopping point. And then, when you went to the interviews, it just looked good. It was like, okay, you finished exactly where you're at. You finished all your work. You wrapped everything up. Now it makes sense why you're interviewing and applying now. But I wouldn't wait, especially if you're looking for a job. Just know once you send that resume out, that's what you have to work with. So just make sure you're prepared. But I would say if you're ready, just do it. Make sure your timeline works out too. Don't apply when you still have a year left of schooling, obviously. Just map out your timeline, and if it works and you're ready and you feel comfortable, just start.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. I would say definitely at least a couple months. But to reiterate what Joe said, just make sure your resume and your cover letter are ready, because when you send it out, you're trying to make yourself stand out. So yeah, I say it's never too early. Maybe like a year or so would be early, but I get that it's hard because a lot of job descriptions are like, oh, you need your master's, and you're like, but I'm gonna have it in like 4 months. Does that count? So I do get that, but they also get that. So just submit it when you feel comfortable. Definitely give it a couple months, because the process can be a long one sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just have to echo what they've both said. I think it's good to start early. I know for me, when I was coming out of my undergrad and I was deciding whether or not to go into a master's or go directly into research, I was often told by career services that it was okay to wait pretty long, and that even if I started too early, it might hurt me a little bit, just because research jobs tend to want to hire more or less on the spot. It's not like certain jobs that do on-campus recruiting and they start getting in touch with you a year or more before. I think that that's not necessarily true. I know for me, when I was still in my master's, I started reaching out pretty early. That was partly because of COVID, and I was worried that it would be harder to find a job. But I find it really helpful. I mean, in your email, when you're cold emailing or whatever you may be doing, I would just say, hey, I'm going to graduate in 4 months, and would you be open to having someone join your team then? As long as you feel like you're ready and you can kind of lay out your timeline for whoever you're talking to, I don't think you can go wrong reaching out early. I also think if you feel like you're a little late, I wouldn't freak out, especially going into something like research. It is true that oftentimes when you connect with the PI and they have an opening, they may want you to start pretty soon. So yeah, if you're worried about being late because you haven't started yet, I wouldn't worry too much about that either.
Thank you. And for our students, if you look at the chat, I posted our Career Cafe hours, and this is when you can submit your CV, your resume, or a cover letter, and a career ambassador like me will check it out. We're all trained. I'm there every Wednesday night. So when you start applying for jobs or even before then and you want someone to look it over, feel free to stop by. And this is also open to alumni because Jefferson guarantees your degree, so the Career Development Office serves you for life. Our next question is for Monica. Do many people come from bench research backgrounds at the EPA? How many opportunities for bench work are there?
Yeah, so there are a lot of opportunities for bench research. Even just in Annapolis, Maryland, there is an environmental lab. So you're talking about water quality and things like that. You need someone to collect those samples, to analyze that data, and that goes for anything, for soil, air samples, whatever it may be. So research is definitely important, and the opportunities are there. There is a wide range of careers in the EPA. So I'm an environmental scientist, but I know someone else that's a geologist, someone else that's an epidemiologist, someone else that's whatever they may be. So the opportunities are there.
Great. And what are the most important skills in your job? And did you acquire them in grad school or on the job training?
Yeah, so I can speak very directly from a wet bench scientist. I pretty much had my hands on everything that I'm doing now in grad school. And a lot of the questions and interview questions and during the whole process were really just about your techniques. And so I can keep it brief, but everything I learned at Jefferson during my graduate schooling came into play before I even stepped foot in the door. Obviously, when you go to a new place, you're going to learn their ways. You're going to learn new things. You're going to learn new ways to do the old things that you did. But I find that the research I did in graduate school directly correlated to what I'm doing now. It definitely set a foundation, especially going from the wet bench to another wet bench. It's directly correlative. So for me, it was really just a hands-on research, how to conduct research, and how to become a good scientist that really prepared me for where I'm at now.
Yeah, I think with my job, it kind of differed a little bit because there's different divisions. There's a lot that comes with on-the-job training, and they definitely prepare you for it. They have a lot of training that they put you through. So, coming out of the training and getting, the field training, there is field training that is mandatory in order to be like a credentialed inspector for whatever. So that definitely prepares you. Their specifics and their laws and regulations is not something that I would say, I learned from school. However, there are things, environmental things like that they kind of expect you to know. So, it kind of depends what your job is. And I think it's different because there are so many backgrounds, so they the core samples, they make sure that you learn. And if you learn them in school, you're going to learn them again in your training, kind of like that, just so that they know that you know them. But then there's things, like the GIS side. Everything that I have done for the agency has come strictly from my graduate school. There's no extra training that I've received from the workplace. It's all things that I've learned that I've been able to bring to them. And those are really valuable skills. Coding and things like that are really valuable in the agency. So they flock to it, and they don't know more that they can teach me. So it's really all things that I bring to them through grad school.
I think for me, there's a interesting distinction between things like hard skills and soft skills. So hard skills may be things in the lab, like knowing how to perform um, certain types of, chromatography, or knowing how to grow a certain culture. Um, in the clinical sphere, there are less of those things that you need to know going into it. And so for that reason, the soft skills, at least in my job currently, tend to be a lot more important. And those are things like patient interaction, time management, being really diligent, and being a good writer, things that help move along projects, help you connect with the patients that you're talking to, and help you work together with a variety of people in a team. Um, in terms of skills that I've acquired on the job, I found that the few hard skills that tend to be helpful, um, they really try to reinforce on the job. So for example, going into it, I think it was a plus that I had had some experience um, with data science and statistical softwares like R, SPSS. Um, but it's something on the job that if you need to know it, they will train you in it again. If not train you, sit you down with someone and run through your first analysis or your first whatever it is you have to do together. Um, and then in terms of the soft stuff, that's also things you develop on the job. Those are things that my masters really helped me develop, especially on the patient side of things. Um, and it's things they want to see in an interview, but it's also things that you never really stop developing. And I think for any job, they really try to keep developing your skills, especially in jobs like research, um, especially in like university laboratory research. The majority of people that work with me now, at least the young people, intend to go on to do another degree of some sort. So our bosses and the more senior doctors within an institute are really, really bent on making sure that we're growing in our positions and making sure that we're developing our current skills and acquiring new ones. And it's something they place a lot of emphasis on.
Our next question is, what personal attributes do you think are necessary for your position?
Again, mine are going to be pretty basic. You really just need to, you're obviously in science, so you need to be able to communicate well with people, communicate well with different levels of people, and people that have no idea what you're talking about. So I think good communication skills are key, especially being a scientist and data scientist. Definitely, this is cliche, but good note taking and really tracking what you're doing, because you will get asked about something you did 2 years ago, and just minute details. I mean, what vial did you use? So you really need to be really organized and just so you don't lose anything, because you're accountable for everything you do. Trying to think of a good third one, but yeah, for me, it's really just communication, definitely public speaking, and just organization is really key. I mean, they're cliche, but there's a reason they're cliche. It's because they're necessary.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Organization is key. At least I know in my job, and honestly, probably everyone else's job, there is a lot. And if you become disorganized and you don't know where things are, it just kind of reads wrong. It can read as unprofessional. You feel really chaotic. The people you're trying to talk to feel really chaotic. It's just not a good situation. So definitely organization. Communication is also really key. I'm not gonna, go over everything Joe just said, but know that someone else agrees with him that, working on your public speaking skills, working on your communication skills. Also, I think that's something that is really, really important is knowing like conflict management. So knowing how you can get across your opinion when you disagree with something. I think that is, something I'm still working on every single day. So, just I guess that kind of piggybacks off of communication, but really just kind of, being sure in yourself. And, if you feel something or, something, just figuring out how you can best communicate that conflict, confrontation, things like that. So, and also time management is also really key. My job is really, really busy and there are a million things that I could be doing. So I know sometimes I kind of get, when you have a million things to do and you're like, where do I start, and prioritization. So it can kind of get tricky because you're like, oh, okay, if I do a little bit of everything, that's good. But then you only have like a little bit of everything done. Whereas, it's trying to find the balance between that and also, okay, let me just spend today working on this thing, get that banged out, and then tomorrow I'll spend my day on this. So I think learning time management and prioritization is huge. And I think if you've made it this far in your academic career, you've probably got that one under your belt. So.
Yeah, I'd like to echo everything they both said. Those are all really important things, especially going off what Monica said. I think for me, the thing that makes my job the most manageable and the most doable, especially when I'm really busy, is being able to prioritize and really manage my time. And not only that, but to kind of take on a leadership role and inform and communicate with everyone that I'm working with, this is when I can do this is when I can do this, really being able to manage a bunch of different things at once. In my job right now, I work between a bunch of different projects, and it's just so happened that way, especially I think because of COVID and things are a little bit more hectic right now. But I'm working on a lot of things, and those things most often don't coordinate with each other. They're headed by different people. And so at the center of it is me. And it's really important to be able to schedule your time and make time for everyone, but also to know your limits and set your boundaries and make sure that you're working on a sustainable and on a feasible schedule.
Thank you. So we're only going to have time for one more question, but if students have more questions, how can they reach you? Is there an email or can they find you on LinkedIn?
I just put my stuff in, all my contact information into the chat. So yeah, you can reach me by email. You can reach me by LinkedIn. Shoot me a message anytime. I'd love to, talk over the phone if you have more questions. Email. We can do a Zoom meeting, whatever it may be. Happy to help.
Yeah, likewise. I actually might want to be one of the rare few that do not have a LinkedIn, but please email me at any time. I check my email 24/7, basically. And if you want to set up a phone call or a Zoom call, post email, that would be great. I'm happy to help.
Yeah, same with me. I just posted both my email and my LinkedIn in the chat. So if you have any questions about research or even things like gap years and applying back to school after your master's, definitely feel free to reach out.
Thank you, everyone. So for our last question, do you have any advice for someone interested in pursuing your career path?
I guess to keep it brief with 2 minutes to go here, I said before, when I finished graduate school, I really knew what I loved. I knew what I wanted to do. It's a simple answer, but you go to school so that you choose what you want to do. You're passionate about something and you're interested in something. Best advice I can give you is, don't always chase money. Chase what you want to do. Chase what you can wake up every morning and see yourself doing and get you out of bed. So really just figure out what you love and go for it. I mean, that's the beauty of education and graduate school. So really just go with your heart. Do something you can wake up every morning.
Definitely. Not to sound too corny, but you really can see the passion in someone's eyes when you're talking to them. And I think that is something that really set me apart in my interview, was that everything I said, outside of, my academic achievements and things like that, was the passion, and that I really wanted to be there. And, I genuinely wanted that job. So people can see that, at the end of the day, yes, you are your academic achievements and you should be really proud of them, but you're also a person, and the people interviewing you want to know that they're hiring a person and not a robot. So I think, just follow your heart and work really hard. And also, if there is a job that you do want, I'm going to keep it brief, but I know, I really wanted this job, but it's hard to say all of that in a cover letter, and things can be really awkward. You're like selling yourself and it can be uncomfortable. One minor thing that I could say is that if you look in the job descriptions that jobs will post, they'll post keywords, and more often than not, they're going to run your application through a computer software before a person actually sees it. So if you can tweak your cover letter to include those like keywords, you're golden. You're golden.
I tweaked my resume and my cover letter for every single position I applied for, and I got the keywords off of the application. Good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my advice is just to take your time. I know for me, coming out of undergrad, I had gone in thinking I wanted to go straight to med school, and I got a little bit confused getting into research, especially because I knew I wanted to go into mental health care, and it's such an evolving field that the research is such a huge aspect of it. And for me now, 2 years after graduation, I was definitely a little bit stressed at first, but it's become, such an important decision for me to take that time and to really explore the things that I'm interested in. And it's helped me at the end of the day come to a decision when applying back to MD PhD programs to really be confident in that decision and to be able to really list the reasons I'm doing it, which one is good for you, but it's also good for your applications and for getting to do the things that you want to do. And it's perfectly okay to take your time. I don't think there's really any rush getting into your career. For me, thinking about like getting on with my life, this is my life, right? So I don't think you need to feel any stress or hurry when it comes to finding the thing that you love to do.
Thank you so much, Joe, Sterling, Monica. You are all so helpful and very honest with your advice. So that's all the time we have for today. I'll see the rest of you students at the Alumni Relations talk right now. So make sure to check that out. It's another Masters alumni that will be talking. And have a good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Thanks, guys. Bye.